As Americans, we cannot allow this to continue.
What if the quiet house next door weren't a home at all, but a fortress engineered for war, wired for surveillance, and controlled by one of the world's deadliest cartel alliances? And what if the breach of that house revealed something far larger than drugs? Something designed to carve out a territorial footprint inside the United States. Just after dawn in South Houston, that question became reality. What looked like an ordinary 3-story residence on Calhoun Road shattered every assumption federal analysts once held about narcotics networks operating on U.S. soil. Behind its harmless exterior, agents discovered a construction marvel closer to a military stronghold than a criminal hideout. A 410-pound steel-reinforced front door, walls rebuilt with load-bearing braces used in overseas conflict zones, 62 surveillance cameras feeding live data across encrypted channels into Mexico, motion alarms on every window, a basement structured like a command bunker complete with routers, encrypted tablets, radio systems, and financial ledgers documenting shipments worth more than $42 million. The entry team found 780 pounds of narcotics, 14 weapons, 27 encrypted devices, and over $2.3 million in cash concealed behind false walls. But the shock was not in the volume, it was in the intent. This was not a stash point. It was a forward operating base, one modeled with a precision that analysts described as military discipline designed for territorial control. What happened next reshaped the national intelligence picture. As agencies pieced together records found inside the house, maps, coded messages, cash ledgers, construction schematics, they realized the South Houston fortress was not an anomaly. It was the center node of a larger structure, part of a quietly expanding Sinaloa CJNG alliance building hardened footholds inside American neighborhoods. The discovery aligned with warnings in recent reports from Reuters, BBC DW, and Al Jazeera documenting cartel diversification, cross-border engineering expertise, and the rapid militarization of trafficking networks. Under President Trump, federal authorities had intensified pressure on cartel infrastructure, but this find revealed a shift. The cartels were no longer hiding, they were fortifying. Key developments came quickly. Digital blueprints uncovered in the bunker indicated long-term expansion plans across Texas, Tennessee, and Arkansas. Financial trails showed nearly $18 million moved through U.S. shell companies acting as logistics fronts, and messages intercepted from servers linked to Culiacan and Jalisco strongly suggested that cartel commanders had begun experimenting with command and control models traditionally used by insurgent groups. Strategically, the revelation carried profound implications. A foreign criminal alliance had constructed a hardened facility on American soil, testing how far it could build without triggering the alarm of local authorities. The balance between national security and civil freedom tightened. If cartels could embed bunker-grade structures behind suburban lawns, how many others might already exist? How deeply had they penetrated zoning systems, financial networks, and real estate corridors? And if this single fortress was responsible for trafficking lines across 14 states, what would an entire network mean for America's border cities and federal prestige? Yet the human impact remained at the core. Every shipment flowing through the Houston corridor fed the fentanyl crisis tearing through American communities. Every encrypted device represented supply chains ending in overdoses, broken families, and neighborhoods destabilized by violence. As the nation absorbed the revelation, one question dominated the strategic conversation. If the cartels are building fortresses in American neighborhoods today, what will they attempt tomorrow, and how far must the United States go to stop them? The fortress in Houston was only the doorway. Once investigators connected the evidence inside its bunker, encrypted devices, courier logs, routing diagrams, a darker picture emerged. The Sinaloa CJNG alliance had already built a logistical skeleton stretching across the American heartland, and the structure followed the logic not of criminals, but of a multinational corporation planning controlled expansion. For 4 months, analysts tracked patterns that began as anomalies and hardened into certainty. Small rental properties in Arkansas, Tennessee, Louisiana, Mississippi, New Mexico, and Oklahoma were not homes at all. They were micro-distribution hubs, disguised with short-term leases, rotating tenants, and cash renovations. Each location served a single function: receive bulk narcotics from the Houston command node, divide shipments into smaller loads, and move them north toward Denver, Chicago, Kansas City, and St. Louis. It was a supply chain calibrated with the precision of a commercial freight network. Intercepted communications confirmed this operational architecture. Messages routed through off-grid devices and hidden servers, some bouncing through Culiacan, some through Zapopan, revealed command instructions, cash movements, and asset rotations. Financial tracers found nearly 18 million quietly pushed through Texas shell companies posing as trucking firms, construction contractors, or logistics suppliers. According to recent reporting from Reuters, and the Guardian cartel groups in Mexico had increasingly adopted corporate structures, formal payrolls, centralized accounting departments, and long-range planning cells. The US findings aligned perfectly with that trend. But scale was the real shock. The Houston node was not the hub of convenience analysts once assumed. It was one of 6 operational centers in a super-regional grid stretching over 10 states. Each center controlled its own feeder homes, drop points, safe garages, and fallback shelters. The system operated like a neural network, decentralized enough to survive raids, but coordinated enough to maintain uninterrupted supply flow. Federal analysts struggled with the strategic implications. If a criminal alliance could replicate a corporate logistics model inside US borders, how far had it already spread beneath public view? And if one fortress masked an entire interstate lattice, how many more remained undiscovered? The deeper the analysis went, the more alarming the conclusions became. Cartel strategists were not merely transporting contraband, they were embedding infrastructure. They were probing weaknesses in property laws, testing predictable patterns in local zoning boards, and leveraging the anonymity of short-term rentals to hide structural nodes. DW's coverage of cartel infiltration into European logistics hubs underscored how similar tactics had already destabilized foreign cities. The United States now faced a version of that threat on its own soil. The human cost also grew clearer. Each microhub fed distribution rings responsible for overdoses, violent turf conflicts, and the arrival of fentanyl in towns unprepared for its devastation. Every encrypted tablet, every hidden ledger traced to neighborhoods already buckling under addiction. Strategically, the discovery forced a change in federal posture. Under President Trump, federal agencies intensified joint operations, treating cartel logistics not as criminal activity, but as national infiltration. Commanders recognized the danger, a foreign alliance mapping the American interior with the precision of a military planner. And now the question burned hotter: if this grid continued to expand unnoticed, how long before it evolved from a trafficking network into a territorial system capable of open confrontation? By 3:47 a.m., the map changed. Surveillance drones circling above Houston detected subtle but unmistakable signs of preparation cartel lookouts shifting positions, heat signatures clustering in stairwells, and a black SUV with improvised armor orbiting between target houses as if relaying commands. What should have been a simple series of raids had transformed into a battlefield waiting to ignite. Federal Command issued a terse update that carried the weight of a warning: expect coordinated resistance. Targets are awake. Targets are armed. The first strike team moved toward a neglected duplex known as Target 3. From the outside, it appeared forgotten: dark windows, chipped siding grass grown high. But the moment the breaching stack reached the front, muzzle flashes burst through the night. AR-style rifles with illegal modifications opened fire in controlled bursts aimed low to trap agents behind ballistic shields. Shells skittered across the porch as the air shook with concussive force. Inside the duplex, cartel fighters maneuvered with discipline more common to militias than criminals. 2 men controlled the stairwell from behind sandbag firing positions. Another pair advanced and retreated in coordinated rhythm, one reloading while the other fired. A lookout in the kitchen streamed the firefight through a helmet-mounted camera, feeding live visuals to a handler across the border. It was a tactical defense, not a panicked retreat. They were fighting to hold ground. But federal forces did not move blindly. Under President Trump, joint operations between FBI SWAT, DEA strategic teams, DHS tactical units, and ATF specialists had been strengthened, a response shaped by clashes documented by Reuters and Defense News detailing cartel access to military-grade modifications. The Houston raids demonstrated why such integration mattered. Ballistic shields advanced. Night vision-equipped agents flanked. Breaching tools shattered reinforced interior walls. Overwatch teams tracked shadows through smoke as flashes from rifles illuminated fractured hallways. A block away, Homeland Security remotely cut power to the neighborhood, plunging the street into darkness and knocking out the cartel's camera grid. The living room became a choke point, thick with dust and motion alarms screaming through the chaos. A floodlight rigged by the cartel flickered, rapidly distorting depth and turning each silhouette into a potential threat. Yet the federal push continued. Agents synchronized movement, one team clearing the stairwell, another breaking through a rear wall, a third securing the basement route to prevent escape. Within 90 seconds of the coordinated push, the tactical tide shifted. The stairwell collapsed into federal control. The sandbag barricades fell. The final two gunmen barricaded in the basement bunker dropped their weapons as flashbangs detonated outside the door. 8 suspects were captured alive. No federal agents sustained injuries. Across the city, similar scenes unfolded at 5 more target locations, each demonstrating the increasing militarization of cartel defenses. Reports from BBC and Al Jazeera had warned for years that cartel alliances were adopting insurgent-style tactics. Houston delivered undeniable proof. The question echoed across command rooms as dawn approached. If cartel squads were willing to engage federal forces with battlefield discipline today, what level of confrontation would they risk tomorrow? When the gunfire stopped, the deeper danger finally surfaced, not through the weapons seized, but through what the cartel had already built quietly, patiently, and with alarming precision. Inside the Houston bunker, agents cracked open 34 steel lockboxes. What lay inside pushed the operation far beyond law enforcement and into the territory of political infiltration, structural manipulation, and foreign influence networks operating inside American cities. Ledger Books tracked nearly $120 million in annual revenue moving through the Houston corridor alone. Hard drives contained coded exchanges with mid-level coordinators in Culiacan, Zapopan, and Sonora, proof that the South Houston node reported directly to cartel leadership, not to fragmented local crews. But the most unsettling discovery came from a tablet hidden behind a magnetized false panel files linking cartel operatives to individuals embedded in zoning boards, contracting offices, and inspection departments across multiple U.S. states. Not elected officials, not high-profile positions, something far more dangerous: the administrative gatekeepers who decide what gets built, where it gets built, and how long it takes. For years, investigative reports from The Guardian, DW, and Reuters had warned that criminal organizations often bypass political leaders and instead target low-profile officials who hold regulatory leverage. The evidence in Houston confirmed that the Sinaloa CJNG alliance followed that same model inside the United States. Maps found inside the bunker detailed an expansion plan structured in 3 phases: acquire, reinforce, activate. The diagrams mirrored military forward operating bases, complete with armored rooms, sensor grids, and escape tunnels. 8 new fortified houses had been scheduled for construction, 5 across Texas, 3 around Memphis and Little Rock. Even more alarming, federal analysts found drafts of zoning variance petitions already prepared. Some included notes about which officials were flexible, which offices had slow turnover, and where external pressure possible. The cartel wasn't just buying homes, it was studying American bureaucracy, probing for openings, weaknesses, and human vulnerabilities. When the intelligence reached Washington at 7:40 a.m., the reaction was immediate. The Attorney General briefed senior leadership, describing the operation as an attempted territorial expansion by a foreign criminal alliance on U.S. soil. Minutes later, the Secretary of Homeland Security echoed the assessment, aligning it with patterns documented by BBC and Defense News on cartel militarization and political encroachment abroad. At the White House, senior advisors pressed for a unified response, warning that the discovery shifted the stakes. Under President Trump's intensified anti-cartel posture, officials argued that fortified sites inside the United States could no longer be treated as stash houses; they were command nodes with political intent. Local leaders reacted just as urgently. The Texas governor, standing beside federal officials, delivered a blunt message: "This is a foreign network operating with military discipline. Texas will answer accordingly." Throughout the day, agents continued cataloging the political threads exposed inside the bunker. They found shell companies funding small municipal campaigns, property acquisitions disguised through rotating landlords, patterns suggesting long-term efforts to influence permitting processes. Not enough to accuse elected officials, but enough to prove the cartel had been probing, quietly testing the machinery of American governance. By nightfall, one reality became unavoidable. The Houston Fortress was not an isolated operation. It was the anchor point for a structural incursion, one designed to test how much influence a foreign criminal alliance could accumulate before America pushed back. And the question grew more urgent with every new discovery. If the cartels are already studying the architecture of American power, how far are they willing to go next? By the time the Houston command post fell, federal agencies were already mobilizing a counteroffensive shaped by the intelligence pulled from the bunker's tablets, ledgers, and encrypted devices. What emerged was a blueprint for a broader threat: 5 additional fortified houses, 2 inside Texas, and 3 across Tennessee and Arkansas, all scheduled for activation within 90 days. Each location had been disguised with shell landlords, short-term leases, and off-the-books renovations. The Sinaloa CJNG alliance had not just planted roots, it had begun constructing a lattice of regional command sites. The response was immediate. Under President Trump, the Justice Department, Homeland Security, and the FBI authorized Operation Iron Meridian, the most aggressive multi-state anti-cartel initiative in recent memory. Across multiple command centers, analysts fused satellite imaging, financial tracing, and intercepted communications. DEA teams mapped courier routes funneling through the Memphis corridor. ATF flagged weapons movements tied to straw buyers in Oklahoma and Louisiana. DHS surveillance units locked down known cartel entry points along the southern border. By late afternoon, the first strikes began. In Dallas County, tactical teams converged on a warehouse disguised as a construction supply distributor. Inside, agents uncovered racks of rifle components, ballistic plates, encrypted radios, and more than 200 pounds of chemical precursors destined for pill labs. Fireproof walls and motion-triggered floodlights inside the building revealed that the warehouse had been engineered as a defensive fallback site, one capable of resisting federal entry long enough for key cartel operatives to escape. 3 armored SUVs were seized, each in early stages of modification, mirroring the improvised armored convoys documented by Reuters and Defense News in cartel operations across Mexico. The message was clear: the alliance had begun preparing mobile command units on U.S. soil. San Antonio revealed something different, something even more unsettling. The target house there was not fortified yet, but its basement overflowed with political materials: voter registration lists, property acquisition files, municipal zoning documents. Analysts concluded that the cartel was mapping influence pathways, identifying which local systems were vulnerable to external manipulation. The Sinaloa CJNG alliance had begun studying American governance with the patience of a long-term investor. In Tennessee, Homeland Security intercepted a convoy of cartel runners transporting cash and encrypted devices toward Nashville. The pursuit ended without gunfire, but the implications were unmistakable. The cartel had attempted to relocate its command structure before the federal net closed. America had caught them in motion. By nightfall, a joint statement from Washington confirmed the scale of the operation. The Secretary of Homeland Security declared that fortified houses inside the United States would no longer be classified as criminal stash points, but as foreign command sites operating in violation of national security statutes. The Attorney General reinforced that stance, warning that territorial expansion by foreign criminal alliances would be met with total federal resistance. Across Texas, Tennessee, and Arkansas, raids continued, calculated, synchronized, relentless. Each site dismantled, each ledger seized, each operative captured, pushed the Sinaloa CJNG alliance further into retreat. The network that had taken years to build was collapsing in days. And yet a final question lingered across Washington's war rooms. If this was the cartel's first attempt at territorial expansion, what would the next attempt look like, and how much stronger must America become to stop it? When the final raid concluded and the smoke cleared over South Houston, one truth stood undeniable: the Sinaloa CJNG alliance had attempted to build a territorial architecture inside the United States and failed. What began as a concealed fortress on Calhoun Road had raised the veil on a much larger strategic incursion, one that Washington could no longer treat as a criminal enterprise. Under President Trump's authority, federal agencies unified behind a single posture: foreign cartel fortification anywhere on U.S. soil constituted a national security threat. By sunrise the next morning, the collapse of the cartel's regional command network was already underway. Evidence seized from the Houston Fortress maps, lockboxes, financial transfers, zoning documents, and encrypted communications provided a roadmap of the alliance's ambitions. 6 regional nodes were confirmed. All 6 had now been compromised. The force of the U.S. response reshaped the playing field. The strategic motive behind the cartel's infrastructure had grown clearer with each recovered file. They envisioned an internal grid of fortified houses, disguised warehouses, shell landlords, and logistic corridors capable of moving narcotics north and weapons south. It was a structure reminiscent of insurgent networks documented by BBC, DW, and Defense News in conflict zones where criminal groups evolved into quasi-military hybrids. Houston had been designed as the anchor point of that transformation inside the United States. But once the fortress fell, the alliance's cohesion collapsed. Shell companies froze, trafficking routes fractured, courier lines that once stretched through Arkansas, Tennessee, Mississippi, Oklahoma, and New Mexico dissolved under the weight of coordinated seizures. As ATF choked weapons supplies and DEA dismantled courier rings, the Sinaloa CJNG network found itself fighting against time rather than territory. Washington moved swiftly to reinforce the message. The Justice Department announced new prosecutorial guidelines treating fortified cartel properties on U.S. soil as foreign command installations. The Department of Homeland Security escalated cross-border intelligence operations. The Pentagon, according to Reuters reporting, expanded surveillance assistance for tracking armored vehicles and drone-assisted cartel movements in northern Mexico. America was demonstrating not merely force, but resolve. The human impact of the collapse was immediate. Experts from Al Jazeera and The Guardian noted that the dismantling of a multi-state supply grid, one responsible for distributing fentanyl, methamphetamine, and cocaine across 14 states, represented a significant break in the flow of deadly narcotics that had devastated American communities. Every seized tablet, every intercepted courier, every shuttered micro-hub meant fewer overdoses, fewer street-level turf conflicts, fewer families shattered by addiction. At the same time, the discovery raised urgent questions about national vulnerability. How had a foreign alliance built fortified structures beneath the country's radar? How had zoning systems, rental markets, and commercial corridors been quietly manipulated? How many other networks might be testing similar strategies? The balance between security and freedom became sharper. Protecting communities required vigilance, but preserving American openness required precision. In the end, the Houston Fortress became more than a crime scene. It became a warning. Cartels were no longer content with trafficking, they were experimenting with territorial presence. And America's defenders had shown that when foreign networks attempt to gain a foothold, the response will be decisive, unified, and overwhelming. Now the country faces the next critical question after witnessing this level of cartel engineering on U.S. soil. How far must America go to ensure that no foreign network ever builds such structures again, and will the public support the level of vigilance required? The discovery of a fortified Sinaloa CJNG stronghold in South Houston exposed a threat far beyond narcotics. Hidden behind the facade of a quiet suburban home, the structure functioned as a military-style command hub, controlling a $42 million trafficking operation and anchoring a multi-state logistics grid stretching across 10 U.S. states. Evidence recovered from the bunker financial ledgers, encrypted devices, zoning documents, and expansion maps revealed a foreign criminal alliance testing whether it could build and reinforce territory inside the United States. Once the network surfaced, federal agencies launched Operation Iron Meridian, a sweeping counteroffensive under President Trump. Raids in Texas, Tennessee, and Arkansas dismantled warehouses, intercepted couriers, seized armored vehicles, and uncovered political influence attempts hidden in shell companies and municipal files. The collapse of the Houston Fortress triggered the unraveling of the entire regional system, halting supply chains responsible for spreading fentanyl, methamphetamine, and cocaine across 14 states. The operation delivered a clear message. Fortified cartel infrastructure on U.S. soil will be treated not as organized crime, but as a national security incursion. Yet one question remains unresolved. If cartels are capable of building hidden command sites today, how aggressively must America prepare for the threats they may attempt tomorrow?